Let's start with the official opposition once again, the Conservatives. After 2 decades of representing Ottawa's Carleton riding, we know that Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre lost that seat to the new Liberal MP Bruce Fanjoy. Walk us through what happened in this riding. Lots of discussion online about, is this about this long ballot choice? Was it about his choice to go to convoy? Did he not spend enough time in the riding? What happened?
Right. I mean, like everything else, it's usually not going to be just one thing.
Right.
Fanjoy had been working on this, really in earnest for like 2 years. I think that a long time ago, the Liberals identified this as a possible riding they could switch. There was one election, I think it was 2015, where Poilievre won, but it wasn't by a landslide. There was a sense of weakness there. And so I think the Liberals identified this as something that they might be able to work on to coax out that Liberal support base into a fuller expression. So, I mean, I think mostly it's a story of here's the right candidate who did the work in the riding. Now, there's a couple of other things. Obviously, the leader's time is the most important resource that there is, or one of the most important resources during the campaign. And clearly, the Conservatives were very much, in contention for government, and they were running a national campaign. And they ran this campaign really focused on Pierre Poilievre. Like, I had heard stories from journalists and things about how, candidates weren't really supposed to be talking to the media, and they weren't supposed to be doing their all-candidates debates, although I think some of them did. The focus was Poilievre, which really meant he was the one who was going around and there was so much pressure on him to go to other ridings and be there with other candidates. It didn't give him as much time in his own riding. And so I think, a few factors taken together, the redraw of the electoral boundaries as well meant that the population of the riding was different, and there was actually new constituents in the riding that hadn't been, in a position to vote for Poilievre before. And so it was also a question of courting new voters.
Mr. Poilievre said he is going to stay on as party leader. But something I learned yesterday is that unlike Prime Minister, where you can be the Prime Minister and not have a seat in the House of Commons, although it's not ideal, when you are the leader of the opposition, the same rules don't apply. So once the House returns, what does his leadership look like in that role? Who will be in the House of Commons until he can find a seat there? And how does that affect his leadership?
So he can be. So that is all true, right? Like we did see Mark Carney for a little while, be the Prime Minister before he had a seat in the House. Different situation when it comes to the leader of the opposition, because the position is actually defined in the standing orders in the House of Commons, and he can be the leader of the Conservative Party. That's a different process. But as far as the leader of the House of Commons, leader of the opposition, they will need to find somebody else to do that job. I don't think they've indicated who that will be. It's possible that Poilievre will go through some negotiations where somebody says they're going to step aside for him. Then that creates a vacancy and he can run in that by-election. But that's not an overnight process, right? Like if an MP steps aside and they're willing to do that for Mr. Poilievre, it could be 6 months before the by-election is called. Mr. Carney makes that decision, and he doesn't have to do it quickly. And even if it happens, then you're in a by-election. It's not a high five on your way in, right? Like, you've got to go campaign. And don't take voters for granted, I think, is one of the messages that we can take from not to be a jerk about it, but I mean, Mr. Fanjoy has made the point that Poilievre perhaps took the riding for granted. And so don't be too quick to go tell voters what they're going to do. It's not easy.
Mr. Poilievre did mention lessons learned, and perhaps this was one of them. Who knows? We'll wait and see. Let's move on to the NDP, because part of the reason we are in this position with this 44%, 41% of the popular vote is because the NDP bottomed out. And we haven't seen a collapse like this since the early 1990s. How did they lose their base, and when did it start to unravel for them?
Well, I mean, I think it started to unravel a long time ago when the NDP decided to get into this confidence and supply agreement with the Liberals. I understand that there were reasons for that and that it wasn't all across the board a bad idea. But I think one of the implications was that the NDP really lost a sense of its own identity. And they lost a momentum as an opposition party who was holding the government to account every day. They really kind of took on the role of supporting the Liberals, and it felt like that was the de facto. And I think that cost them in terms of being able to keep in the minds of voters a reason why we need the NDP there. And I think even but on top of that, when this election started to take shape, and it was a sense of, who's going to be the Prime Minister, who's going to deal with Donald Trump, who's going to lead Canada, that became became the ballot question very quickly. And because the NDP is a smaller party, they weren't in a position really to answer that question because they weren't in contention for government. And so all those factors together, I think, just created created a loss for them, even in ridings where maybe they wouldn't win, but they would typically have a pretty good showing. Like the number of ridings in Atlantic Canada, for example, you could see early in the night, it just wasn't showing up. That vote collapsed.
I want to throw up really quickly what I call the group of seven. These are the 7 seats, the 7 NDP members that are heading back to the House of Commons. They're going to try, I assume, to pull an interim leader from there. Then, of course, the party has to rebuild. And Lori, we're going to have you back for that conversation because we have run out of time. But I'm curious to know, as is the rest of the country, where do they pull a leader from as they rebuild? Is it from the group of 7? Do they take them from outside like they did from Jagmeet Singh? We will have to wait and find out. Lori Turnbull, political science professor from Dalhousie. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me. Take care.